If you're like me, you've been super concerned that things like account takeover and all these other kinds of cyber attacks that we see with online businesses just seem to be exploding. Like 22 to 23 seems like a year where it sure would be nice if we could get our arms around that. Now I have a video today of a visitor here in New York that I think you want to stick around for. You're going to learn something from him. He's an icon in this area, runs a very cool cybersecurity company. So stick around, I think you'll enjoy the discussion. Hi, I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber. I want to welcome you to our discussion today. I have an old friend today here in the studio, Tamer Hassan, who runs Human, very cool company here in New York City, and we're going to ask Tamer about a whole bunch of different things. We've got a list of things here on the paper, but I'm probably going to toss the paper and we'll just talk about cybersecurity, so it's going to be fun catching up. Tamer, how you doing?
Good, great.
Great to see you.
It's always great to be here with you, Ed. Thank
you have had a busy couple of years.
It has been a busy 10 years, I would say.
All good. All good. Yeah. Tell us about Human. Tell us about the company.
Human Security, we started about 10 years ago. In the beginning, focused solely on the problem, is there a human on the other end of the screen, right? The bot problem. Underpins a lot of security use cases, fraud and abuse. Over the last 10 years, we've expanded into what is the human defense platform to protect companies and enterprises against fraud and abuse and attacks across the board.
Some people think of Turing tests as the way that works. Is that part of the tech, or is it a little different?
Yeah, in a way, you can think of dealing with bots, giving them sorts of mini technical Turing tests. Yeah. Getting them to slip it up, right? CAPTCHAs have the wrong idea. We shouldn't be testing every human like they're the fraudster, right? How do we put the burden, technically on the bots? And that's what we've managed to do transparently in the background for a user. And we're widely deployed in that area. Over 20 trillion API calls into the defense platform every week. Wow. And we see about half of the devices globally through our system every month.
Your team shared with us some kind of chilling statistics about ATO and other kinds of attack, like doubling, triple, all these kind of frightening things from 22 into 23. Do you think we're ever going to get our arms around this? It seems like is the gap widening between the offense and defense?
It certainly has over the last 3 years been widening. Now, last year we saw account takeovers double. We saw scraping of sensitive data increase threefold, and account creation, fraudulent account creation up 160%, and kind of behind all of that, right? I always see ATO as the gateway drug to do every other kind of abuse or attack, right? If you compromise the account, if it's a bank, you can do the fraud, the wire fraud on the back end. If it's an e-commerce platform, you can snipe and scalp goods. Whatever it may be, ATO is always the gateway to get into the account, that form of identity fraud. So we've certainly seen a shift in that direction and that increase over the last couple of years, especially last year.
Now, people watching may have this image, very traditional image of human beings at the other end, kind of doing the attacking. You guys have you've taught me that in many cases this is automated. This is automation that's coming at you. Help me understand, what's the role of automation in both offense and defense? I know you know a lot about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. The way I always think of automation is almost the amplifier for ourselves, right? It's putting on the Iron Man suit. And so you look at the cybersecurity and fraud incidents of the last year, 77%, over 77% of them had automation used somewhere in the attack cycle, right? Whether it's for the recon portion, the account takeover, sometimes automating actions downstream. It's a tool. It's a platform for cybercrime. So we see these botnets now, large-scale botnets that are bought and sold, leased, right, and used for a variety of attacks in a lot of different ways. And so automation's become a platform and a tool for modern cybercrime, more or less. Now, we always talk about AI and machine learning, right? Like it's the thing that's going to save us, but we have to remember technology is democratic. Right? Everybody has access to everything. Unless we have some special metal from outer space that nobody else has, our servers run at the same speed as theirs. Yeah. And so ML and AI are used by adversaries just as much, and they have just as much access to it. right? And so more and more, that's going to play a role in the next 10 years, is the use of AI and automation online. And how we deal with that. It's going to be really important to the future of protecting against all forms of attacks, for sure.
So the guts of the human platform would be to differentiate between whether it's human or automated. Is that like a key aspect of the algorithm, or are there some other pieces that might be more important than
We have several hundred algorithms that do just that, and that's where we started, and that's one area, bot mitigation. Today, we're tackling several use cases for abuse and attacks on applications. So account takeover, fraud downstream inside of the account. Sometimes bad human use cases with some of our more recent products, like Account Defender, will map accounts that are used in concert, whether it's a human or a bot, to do different things, and other forms of fraud and abuse. So our view is, what we need to put in front of consumer-facing applications and technology on the internet is a defense platform that fights the fight, that has intelligence, that has a moat of data and a network effective data, right? We know that collective protection is one of the few advantages that we can gain against attackers broadly, and that's not just in our data set in the customer base, but that means working with law enforcement, it means working with other private sector companies. All of that has to come together to make it more expensive for the attack and less expensive for the defense.
Where do you get the intelligence, like to keep up? Like, it's a pretty big burden that you're taking on. It must be, is it all source kind of information that you're taking to stay current on the attacks?
It comes from a variety of layers. Of course, fighting the fight and doing this across over 1,000 brands that we're protecting in a variety of different ways. We see a lot of different attacks, from some of the largest internet platforms in the world to tier 1 banks to e-commerce platforms where we have a large footprint. And then there's all the research that goes with it. We have a threat intelligence function that takes everything that we're seeing and also does the open source intelligence, ties it back. We do a lot of work with law enforcement, in some cases government also, to understand attacks and decipher them and attribute them in some cases. So it all comes together and feeds into an R&D cycle. Now, the thing that I think we often lose track of in defensive security or defense against any form of fraud and abuse is that it's an economic game, right? It's the cost of the attack versus the cost of defense. And traditionally, the cost of the attack is very cheap and the cost of defense is high. Right. And that's a flywheel for winning, right? It's like playing against the house in Vegas. 1% advantage in most games, and that's all the house needs. And you can bet on that in Vegas if you play long enough. And it's the same thing. So our thesis on it is to disrupt those economics, to increase the cost of the attack and lower the cost of defense. And we can do that sometimes with disruptions and takedowns, with collaboration, sometimes using deception, where we morph the responses back into an attacker flow when it's detected. There's a lot of ways to do it, but that's one of the fundamentals that we have to get down in cyber and anti-fraud, is that the outcome of the game broadly will be determined by that cost dynamic, and that's what we have to get back in check.
The offensive disruption, takedown, those are fundamentally different than running, say, a platform. Are they different divisions in your company? Because they seem like pretty big differences in the operational support needed for those two. How do you manage that?
In the Air Force, there was a stat that always surprised me, and I spent 15 years in the Air Force. What percentage of the Air Force do you think is actual pilots, aviators that fly the aircraft?
I bet it's not that many.
Take a guess.
10%.
2%.
2%,
right?
Wow.
And there's so many other roles to keep the planes in the air, to keep people trained, to keep equipment in the right shape, to get to where you need to go. And all of that is a part of that team effort to deliver the mission, right? And I was always humbled by that, being in the cockpit and being in the seat, that how much it actually took to keep us in the air and keep us safe and keep us effective. It's the same thing. The whole company lives and breathes the mission of disrupting the economics, but there's a lot of roles, right? And specifically in your question, we do have a large detection org and a threat intelligence team that work on algorithms that defend attacks, but our engineers also look at how those attacks work. They work collaboratively, and they design features that allow us to do it better, right? And even how we communicate and partner with customers. Like, the customers are a big part of collective protection as well, right? And so everything, if to solve any hard problem, massive teamwork, right? That's it. Any hard problem takes massive teamwork, and that applies to a company, but it also applies to cyber more broadly.
Yeah.
It's the thing that's missing in cyber is massive teamwork, right? Everybody fighting this fight in a siloed form inside their company. The cyber vendor map, so fragmented, difficulty and challenges collaborating with government because it's so expensive and hard to do in some cases, all lead to this fragmented fight instead of a team-based fight, right? And that's one of the most important areas that we can improve upon is massive teamwork.
Air Force guys always get teams. They always get it.
You learn it. Yeah, you learn it right
That
off the
must be
bat.
week one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Teams,
It's funny. I learned it over and over again in so many different ways. I had this opportunity for a while to work odd jobs in between career fields before I started Human, and one of the projects I was on was actually a movie called I Am Legend with Will Smith.
Oh, yeah.
And I was helping out with liaise with the military unit there because that was a real...
You weren't his stunt double or anything?
Yeah, no, not yet. I was working towards it. But, what always amazed me working on the set, you would have hundreds of people. And, there's a lot of energy, a lot of chaos, everybody's everywhere. And, all of a sudden the director would say action, and you would have 1,000 people just laser in. And for 2 minutes, nothing but focus from 1,000 people. And seeing and feeling that and like the outcome of what that produces is amazing, right? And it's kind of one of those examples again to me where you get massive action for massive teamwork that's aligned on a goal.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about government. And pay no attention to all the people on the internet watching us. Just nice and private between you. We'll tell them. But how's government do on these things? Are they helpful? Like when you're doing takedowns, do you find that, like, would you like to tweak a couple of things, or you feel like they're getting better, worse, the same? What would be your sincere advice to government?
Sure. There's always things to tweak and improve,
Yeah.
right? But I am, I think the latest administration in cyber in the U.S. government, really savvy, forward-looking, making the right moves, and I think that's really important. But we have a long way to go, right? It's still incredibly difficult for private and public sector to fully collaborate. It's difficult for private to collaborate. We have headwinds of privacy, that work against us, right, for the right reasons, but make it even more difficult. All of those things still need to be solved for security to become a fabric, and that's what it has to be. We have to be one team in a fabric, right? You would never fight a war as a bunch of siloed tribes, right, against sometimes a very well-funded adversary, right? You were talking about multi-billion-dollar losses or nation-state level activities that are well-funded, incredibly talented pool of security and engineers on the other side, right? So we have to find a way to knit a fabric, and I think we're doing the first steps. You see things like JCDC and other aspects, but when we go to collaborate with law enforcement, which we've done on a handful of occasions, we're able to do it because we've built some trust and some process in doing it. But I think there's still a lot of companies that hesitate because it takes a lot of resource. They don't know what risk they'll expose themselves to, right? It's still a bit of a black box. And that's where I think the real work is. Less than 1% of all cybercrimes are prosecuted. Crazy is that. We have a world where the losses due to cybercrime are doubling in a 5-year period in the trillions. And around the same period, the spend in cyber is going up 20x. And historically, less than 1/3 of 1% of cybercrimes are prosecuted. Those are the wrong numbers, right? You want to see spend go up and things at least slow down. The curves start to bend the other way, right? And I think that just comes back to the economics. The cost is cheap, defensive expensive. It's a flywheel, that incentivizes more and more attackers. As soon as we start to shift that, things start to change a little bit. I think that's the long-term play.
It's funny you mentioned trillions. I was doing a testimony in front of a congressional group once, not too long ago, and I said that the impact is in the trillions, and I got a call afterwards, and they said, before we go commit this, you meant that you meant billions, right? That was you want us to fix that, and I go, no, I meant trillions. They said, really? I said, yeah, leave it, trillions. You know, I thought it was a typo. But anyway, back to your platform. What does a human platform look like? When I'm deploying, what am I putting where? Am I putting something in front of my e-commerce site? Is it in the cloud? What does it look like for people to say, hey, I'd like to do this? What do I have to do? What do they buy?
Yeah, the human defense platform is essentially a set of modules that integrate with an application or a website.
Got it.
So sometimes we're selling to the security team, sometimes it's the product and technology teams, other times it's fraud teams directly. We see a lot of fraud in marketing and advertising, and sometimes we're selling into there. But largely speaking, we're inside the application, single line of code in some cases, or we have 80 different integrations with CDNs and firewalls and things like that make it easy to turn on. And we'll integrate with a login, or we'll integrate with whatever events need to be protected from fraud and abuse. So it could be anything from e-commerce, sniping and scalping. We see everything from fraud there to fraud in music and media to, of course, account takeovers and financial services being the number one use case for us there.
I would think so, yeah. Normal users, this is all invisible. They don't know any of this is going on.
That's right.
So that's kind of cool. So I've got a business. I'm concerned with account takeover and scraping, all these horrible things that we see just exploding. I drop these packages into my environment, pretty simple to put in place, and then I get no new friction for normal users, but automated attacks are going to what? Will they get blocked, notified? Do they get tangled up in something? Like, what's the experience when something happens?
It's a range of possibilities in the hands of the security or technology team. So we go to full blocking. The vast majority of our
customer
deployments,
decides what mode.
You can turn it on detection only and look at reporting. You can feed it into a back end SIM and a response team. Oftentimes people will do both. Most of the time we'll be in full mitigation mode where the attack is blocked as it's coming in. And then we have a team that's continuously monitoring. We have a 24/7 SOC and a threat intelligence capability where we're if the attacks are persistent enough, we're doing the research to start to attribute the type of attack, the tools used, and in some cases even the individuals if it makes sense to go that far.
Are the compliance frameworks up to date in this area, like NIST and other things, or they still have a little ways to go to kind of make this mandatory?
Yeah, they still have a little ways to go, but there are
improvements. Glad you said that. I was leading the witness there. Because it bugs me.
NIST is perfect.
Stuff should be. It's crazy that we both know that government standards will always lag innovation. That's fine. But you guys have been doing this for a while. It seems like these things should be mandatory if they're not already. And I think there may be some sectors where it's mandatory, but it seems like there is a little ways to be more specific about. Am I reading that right?
That's right. Yeah, there's not much in terms, for example, our bot mitigation view. There's not much in terms of controls around that, even though it's one of the most prolific tools used in most incidents, right? And you see things like the 2016 Bots Act around tickets, ticket scalping, and the FTC's only prosecuted it one time. There was, the Senate committee hearing last week.
Tell us more, like Ticketmaster and all these other things. What happened there?
Yeah, well, it's a challenging problem where you open up the technology to the entire world, and in this case, it was Taylor Swift in the concert, right? And bots are being used to try and scalp tickets, right? And so there's laws in place against that, but they haven't been enforced. But there's other laws. California has a specific law around bots that make it even more broadly applicable, not just tickets. But a part of that, we come back to, how do we change the economics of this? That cost element matters. If there's risk to it, it matters more. Where these regulations start to really have impact is changing the cost to the attacker and changing the risk to an attacker, right? That's where the the improvements lie.
You guys are in the sweet spot there because you have a lot of experience both with kind of malvertising and ad fraud and cybersecurity. You guys are in a good place to understand those automated attacks. Speaking of which, AI. What do you think? You're one of the, when I think, who are my experts in my network who know automations, what are your thoughts about sort of artificial intelligence? We've all seen this barrage of attention around OpenAI and things like that.
Yeah.
How do these things like influence offensive attacks? Do they become rocket fuel for botnets, or maybe the offense would have to deal with defensive mechanisms that use AI? Like, what's the yin and yang of this whole thing?
Yeah. Well, I think it's certainly only the beginning. The things that we're seeing with ChatGPT that are blowing our minds, I think is the tip of the iceberg. And I often think about, there's that game that you see in some arcades where, it's constantly pushing the coins, the coin stack, piles of coins, and you're trying to get it to push over, and you drop a coin.
Yeah, it never seems to drop any coins.
Well, this is the coin that drops, and it's going to push over. I think everybody's excited about a few use cases that we're seeing, but it's going to push over a lot of other technologies into another level, right? And bots and AI are going to govern the next 10 years of the internet, not just for security and attacks, but for legitimate businesses as well. And there's an alarming gap in the use of bots, the transparency around the use of automation and AI online, the regulation. There's almost nothing there, right? And sometimes even legitimately bots acting on behalf of humans. There was the case I was reading about a few months back where somebody was playing a game online and had developed a relationship through chat with the gamer on the other side over the course of several games in a few weeks, and it turns out it was a bot, right? And it was not disclosed, right? Or you see, again, bots being used to snipe vaccination slots at the peak of COVID, right? As an example. So, I think, this is a data game, and botnets are rich in data. Right, and this is going to govern the next 10 years of the internet, both legitimate and illegitimate use of AI and automation online.
You're pretty optimistic about sort of the cybersecurity equation here. Like, some of the folks we talk to feel like we're headed toward a big sort of global cyber war with just nothing but a mess. Others say, maybe this goes more the way of bank robberies, where eventually we just sort of, the threat wanes, and we don't worry so much about it. Where do you stand on those two?
Yeah, well, I don't think the threat is naturally waning, but I'm a naturally optimistic person.
As CEOs must be.
Which is funny because I used to fly helicopters, and helicopters are known to be pessimists because you're always looking for the thing that's going to go wrong.
Well, you have to be careful.
You fall out of the sky. The thing shouldn't fly, right? But I'm optimistic that we can solve it. I don't think we're doing everything yet. I think, again, it takes massive teamwork. It takes security becoming a fabric, and it takes collective protection, which means that we have to get better, not just private to public, but private to private. We have to do more on offense. We have to do more disruption. We have to do things that make it cost more, right? And we're not moving fast enough. Attackers are moving much faster than we are. And so I think it is solvable. I think we can turn the tides, but it's going to take some more work.
When I get asked that question, I think about you and your company often, because I always get, well, the offense is this big automated thing, these botnets and stuff, and we're all going to go to hell in a handbasket. And I always say, well, wait a minute, the defense has automation too. I mean, you guys do that. My view is it could be that AI becomes a great leveler. Like, it could be that your platform and others that provide protection could use the same types of techniques eventually, like intelligent sort of heuristic capability, machine learning kind of based, to reduce risk and reduce that gap you were talking about. Like, when the gap's getting worse, you got to change the game.
Yeah.
Maybe AI does something there. I don't know. I hope it does. It can be a little depressing when the gap. We're all working so hard and the gap gets worse. It's like, what are we doing wrong?
Yeah, I think certainly AI is going to be become prolific on both sides, you know, but it's not an equal playing field. AI will always be based off of a few things, right? Data included and first mover advantage, those kinds of things. And so that will govern the playing field with AI in the long run. It's also why we believe so much in collective protection and creating that ecosystem where it's actually one team on one side where the data is across and used broadly speaking. And we haven't really figured out, I think as an industry, how to do that at scale at the technology layer, right? We talk a lot about collaboration, it's the right thing, but it has to happen at milliseconds, not days or weeks after an event. So AI will evolve. I don't know if it will level, and I don't know if I want it to level. I want us to have the advantage, right?
That makes sense.
All the defenders. Yeah.
Let me ask a different topic now.
Yeah.
Mergers and acquisitions.
Oh yeah.
So you've been busy in this area. You guys merged with a company that I know well, Perimeter X.
Yeah.
How's that go? Tell us about that. What was the idea there, and how's everything going?
Yeah, I think it surprised all of us at Human and Perimeter X. You know, when I met the founders there a year ago from December, and we just had dinner, and that turned into a whiteboard session. We're competitors, and usually that doesn't work. But as we talked, a few things became apparent. One, we had a shared set of values around technology leading, right? You have to lead with good technology, good product. And the businesses and the teams were very complementary. They were very strong in in some areas, and we were very strong in others, and it kind of fit together. And then you start to think, well, why not?
Minimal channel conflict and things like that. Did you have much of that?
Yeah, minimal, always a little
good.
bit, but they had a strong footprint in e-commerce. We had a strong footprint in media and technology platforms. So all of it came together, and the question, more and more became, why not do it? And the way I always saw it was, it's incredibly difficult to merge two companies and two cultures, especially of the same size. But we're trading, a bunch of other risks over a 3 to 5 year period with this one of, can we build one team out of two companies? And we subsequently even did another acquisition after that of a third company. And that's the risk we took on, and that we chose to serve deliberately, how to create a team, and that has yielded enormous benefits. We have a technology that has an incredibly strong detection engine, a network effect of data of 20 trillion calls a week, a mature front-end product with 80 ecosystem integrations that makes it easier to use and turn on. All of these things are important, and this idea of protection across the whole workflows, from the login activity to the account creation to e-commerce to activity to media, where that network effect of data actually helps. It makes the technology stronger and more effective in all those areas. And so it all really came together in the end.
Mergers and acquisitions can be tough. It is culture. I've spent a whole career dealing with mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, trivestitures, and it all comes down not to the transaction, but to the culture and the trust or lack thereof. But it sounds like you got a nice formula.
You have to work. Yeah, you have to work at it. I agree completely. It's the trust and creating the alignment up front and being transparent about, this is the vision, this is what we're trying to build, and inviting the right people to stay, and letting everyone else go their way if it doesn't match up. Fortunately for us, we had the highest retention on both sides in years after we did the M&A for the next 2 quarters. You have to lead with technology and values and people, right? For us, my M&A philosophy is not about acquiring revenue. It starts with, let's great technology and great people, and then everything else follows if you can align the values.
It's just like a little tip that I would give people watching. When you merge with a company, what I always found useful, I don't know if this is relevant in all cases, but when one company's sort of acquiring another, let's say Acme acquires Consolidated, after a meeting, it's usually a good idea, everybody makes a phone call after the meeting, for somebody from Acme to make the call to somebody about Consolidated about, hey, what'd you think about the meeting? And always making sure that's done instead of Acme calling Acme and consolidate. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like you call, hey, how'd that meeting go? And you call the people you've been with. When you cross that, I've always found, I know it's just a little trite thing, but the person who calls you right after the meeting to ask what you thought, like instantaneously, is sending a signal that you're the person I really want to understand. Hey, you're the first one I'm asking, what'd you think of that meeting?
Yeah.
And in a lifetime of dealing with that, that one little thing has gone so far. I've had people come back to me years later and say, that's when I knew that we were part of your team. We had that big blah, blah, blah meeting. And then I was ready to get up and I look and I go, oh, hey, Ed. They go, hey,
Yeah,
what did you think?
Yeah.
And it, like, you know, now we're on the same team. Like these little things, these symbolic things, are way more important. You know, whether the platforms, you know, the right, they snap into the right APIs. You can fix anything technically, but that trust thing is so essential. If you get that wrong, and you get the airplanes heading in different directions, then it diverges forever. You never fix that.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, I would work for you any day. I think you're an awesome CEO, and you got the whole Air Force Teams thing going on.
That's humbling, and likewise, thank you.
If Tag Cyber goes left, then I'll come.
We should join the same.
I'll
we should be on the same
become a
team.
sales account manager for you
You
guys.
can become our strategist for how to change the cost of the attack.
For people who are watching, if they have some interest, is the website the right place?
Yeah, humansecurity.com and broadly just Googling. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, thank you so much for coming by to say hello.
Likewise.
It was nice to catch up.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
We'll have you come back towards the end of the year and hear how 23 is going.
Yeah, let's try to get ATO to go the other way.
Let's hope so. Maybe we can report that we're steering things back together. So
Right.
Thanks for coming.
Likewise.
For everyone else watching, we'll see you next time.